Good afternoon guys, welcome back to the channel. And welcome back to Dave.
Hiya.
How are we doing?
I'm pretty good, you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So we've got Dave back today, so we're going to be looking at some mid-handicap stuff today. So obviously the last video we did, we were on course, we finished his 9 holes and we've got his assessment. So obviously what we're going to do today is we're going to look at his stats, start to look at the first part of the game that obviously we want to work on.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we're kind of giving it away with what we've seen. So we've looked at his stats. Obviously he shot 42 as we know from last time, and obviously we knew that was to his handicap, so 7 over. First time he's played here, so it's to his handicap, and that's what obviously we're happy to see him do.
Yeah.
So, but obviously we've got areas of his game and we can see from his stats what his handicap rates. So it rates on obviously the distance he hits it, dispersion, so if he's missed the fairway a lot of times. Again, chipping, what we saw, did he hit them right, did he hit them long, did he hit them short, what was it, missed strikes or not? And then putting, obviously we saw he hold a few good putts, obviously hit a few good chips, and we obviously, someone just commented today, to be honest, about the 3-wood and to check Dave's handicap. So
I wish.
Let's have a look. So let's have a look at the stats now. Okay, so if we're looking at Dave's stats now, obviously we can see overall he's saying that he should be 11.7. So that's already obviously a gain of 2 shots on his current handicap. So we need to see obviously why it's saying that and where we're potentially losing. So obviously a big thing is driving. So it's saying that his handicap estimate with how far he hits it and the dispersion was 27.6. So obviously Dave's admitted to me that's one of his weaknesses.
It is.
We certainly saw that on the golf course. We saw some good drives, but we obviously also saw some went slightly awry. Obviously then we look at his approach. So his approach shots into the green 16.5. So again that's above his handicap of what he is now. But again, obviously if you're hitting bad drives and you're having long shots in, it's going to be very hard to obviously have your approach shots lower. Again, then when he missed the greens, obviously we can see chipping 17.5, so 3.5 shots, again over his current handicap. So that's an area that we're going to have a look at today. I'm going to look into a little bit more detail shortly. Sand, 2.8, so that's saying he should be a 2.8 handicap out of the sand. Obviously we had
No sand shots.
no sand shots, so that is very random, but that might be his average, I'm guessing, from previous
rounds, yeah.
rounds. And then obviously putting, so putting is a strength of Dave's obviously at the moment. We can see that he's saying he's +4, but we are going to go through his putting because we know that Dave wants to put a fit in, so we're going to see what putter suits him, if we can get him even higher with his putting. But we can see that his putting's obviously, and his sand play, even though he didn't have any sand play, is making his handicap overall a little bit less, or it should be less. So today we're going to be looking at chipping. So if we have a look now into his chipping, it breaks down obviously the distance of the shots that he had. It also shows where he was missing them as a rule. So obviously we can see 33.3% were left, so just left of the flag. But the main thing we want to look at today in today's lesson is nearly 70% of them were short. 4 of those, so 4 out of the 6 were short. So obviously what we want to see is why they were short. Is it because of landing zone? Is it because of club selection? Why were they short? And obviously what we can do to improve that. Is it technique? So we're going to look at his technique and we're going to go through that shortly. But we're going to start to see what Dave's process is, if we can improve it, and if this would be something that would help you. Okay, so we're out here now. Obviously what I'm going to get Dave to do, we're going to go for the far flag, which is around about 30 yards. So I've just said to Dave now, obviously go through your process as normal. So he's gone to the club that he would use for this, so he's chose the 50.
Yep.
So what I'm going to get Dave to do now is hit a couple of shots to there. I'm going to film him from face on and down the line, and then we're going to start to look at his action. Whenever you're ready, Dave. So good strike.
Yeah.
Came out a little bit hot. Right, so let's go another one now. Blocking the camera, I do apologise. So pretty good shot, a little bit fiery, so it's gone there. So obviously when you've picked this club, so what was your process that you went through? So what would you, obviously the lie was good, because obviously we've given you a good lie to start with. So obviously would that be the normal process that you do, Dave? Obviously we saw there, Dave, obviously he's picked a club, obviously he's gone straight to his 50. He'd obviously had an idea in his head, so what was the idea?
Idea was to hit it towards the first flag that you can see there,
Okay.
and then for it to roll towards that far flag. It's come out a little bit hot. It's not landed where I wanted it to, really. I'm just gone a bit too far through.
Okay, so one of the big things there, obviously we saw on the stats that obviously was saying that Dave on average was short. Obviously here it might be a compensation because he might have been doing it in the last couple of rounds. He's then hit them a little bit long. So one of the big things there, he said obviously he wanted to land it in line roughly with the this first flag here on the right. So obviously what he wanted to do there is he's picked a very small landing zone. So this is what I see very common here, is people pick a small landing zone. It might even be the feather on there. Obviously you're trying to land it on something that might be the size of a 10-pence piece or a quarter if you're from America. I'm running out of coins to be honest now, but dirhams in the UAE. But obviously from there it's very hard to judge how it's going to run out. You're being very precise. I see people then obviously grip a little bit tighter, which brings in shots such as either long or short. So obviously something we're going to go through with Dave now is obviously picking a landing zone that's going to be a lot bigger, maybe give himself 3 or 4 paces, which then it's a lot more comfortable to hit. It won't be as obviously aggressive with the chip. I would say the club is correct for this shot, but obviously we can get that landing zone a bit bigger and make it a little bit easier for him to do. So as we come in here now, obviously what I want Dave to do is walk up on his chip and start to find the first flat zone. So we spoke about this before, obviously picking an area where obviously on the green here now, I would say just before the flag, so he wasn't far off there. But then obviously from here we can go 4 or 5 paces. So we can go 4 or 5 paces here now, and then we've got another 4 or 5 to the flag. So obviously that landing zone is now obviously a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Confidence levels are a lot more that we're going to be able to hit that. So Dave with the same club now, with a larger landing zone, we're going to hit one now and see obviously where that goes. It can be a little bit more relaxed. There's not a pressure to hit it exactly onto this feather or in line with this flag, and we'll see where that goes. So we'll head back. So we can see there Dave's first chip came up a little bit short, and obviously it was a little bit of a missed strike, so he caught the ground slightly before. Obviously the first 2 were a little bit long, then the compensation is obviously to make it short. But then obviously hit the landing zone right in the middle, and it's come down to I'd say 4 feet. So obviously tour average from that distance I would say is around about 25 yards. You're looking at 5 or 6 feet, so it's a very good shot for where he is. So obviously we focus on a bigger landing zone, we're being able to make it easier, but we want to see still why Dave's obviously hitting some a little bit long, caught one a little bit heavy, bit of a Damien Duff, a Robinson special. So what we're going to look at now is obviously Dave's technique, so we're going to get that up on screen now and we're going to talk through what we're going to change with Dave and obviously what we're going to work on. Okay, so we're here with Dave's obviously videos straight up. So obviously one of the biggest things we look at on from face on is the width of his stance. So we can see it's very wide. Obviously we're starting to look like that's something that he's going to hit maybe 80 to 100 yards. If we look down the line, very similar setup. So a long way from the ball, shaft's very shallow, and that's a cause of obviously those ones he catches a little bit before, or he takes off a little bit of loft and sends the fiery ones across. So setup, obviously we'd like to look him at changing that, getting his feet a little bit closer together, getting a little bit closer to the ball and a little bit taller, so he can get a little bit more of a downward attack into the ball, get that ball popping up and have more control. If we look at the motion from face on, after Dave's had a quick double check, not what we wanted, Andy. So as Dave goes back, we can see again he loses a little bit of connection in the arm here. You can also see how his lower body is now wanting to work towards the target. A lot of loft off there, you know, very much why the ball came off very hot. And from there we can see also a lot of loss of connection here with his left arm, which again limits his turn in his lower body. If we watch from down the line, you can see because of the wide setup, the club wants to work a little bit inside on the way back, so again very shallow, a little bit of a loop over the top there and into the ball, handles a little bit high, So it's changed, and then we can see it's very hard for him to rotate that chest through. So let's have a look at the drills, what we're going to get Dave to do now. Okay, so we've just gone through Dave's videos there. Obviously we've looked at your technique, we've seen a few things, not too many, but obviously hit some good chips after with a better landing zone, which is one thing that you can all focus on without having a lesson. But obviously now we want to look at his technique, how we can tighten that up and again get him a little bit more consistent. So obviously we talked about his stance being a little bit too wide, which created a little bit of lateral movement, which again when we saw the first shots come off very low, moving towards the ball, takes more loft off and comes off hot, which again very easy to understand, but that's just coming from setup. Again down the line, obviously it looked like he was about to hit a full shot, so we couldn't really tell if he was hitting a 50 or 100 yard pitch shot or he was hitting a 10-yard bunker shot. So obviously from there we saw that it gave him a little bit too much of a shallow angle of attack, which is why he hit that one a little bit before the ball, a little bit of a drop kick, and it didn't quite run on. So obviously what we want to do is look at his setup, but obviously after the session I need Dave to be able to go away and be able to manage it himself. Can't be there all the time. Some people like James Robinson need people there all the time, but Dave is an individual who is going to sort himself out. Okay, so we've got two clubs here of Dave's. Obviously all we're going to be able to do here is I want you to set one up, and you'll have seen this before, towards our target, a little bit left. So it wants to be parallel to our target, and then Dave's going to put this one in there for his ball position. Okay, so straight against there, so it's like a T-bar. Perfect. Good. And then obviously Dave, what he can do is he can come in here and he can set up consistently, and he can make sure that his stance is narrow, his ball position is slightly forwards, not in the centre, and then from there we can also make sure when he sets up his weight is preset left. So that's obviously one of the things that we talked about, that Dave would be very level, and then from there he could move off. But what we want him to do is get his sternum leaning towards the target, and then from there he can turn on, and that's going to give him a little bit more of an angle of attack, which will get him a little bit more loft on the club, so it'll help it pop up, help him get a little bit more spin, and hopefully get him some more consistency.
So ball forward, because I've always been told ball back for a chip.
Perfect. So just like Dave says there, obviously he's always been told to get the ball position back. If you're struggling, and comment below, are you somebody who's always move your ball position back when you start to chip bad? We want to move that ball position forwards, because then we can use the body and the club better to rotate through. Obviously if we have that ball position back, what I see a lot of times is people still shank that, or the leading edge digs in and the ball doesn't go very far, which I'm guessing you might have seen on numerous occasions. So getting that ball position forwards encourages us to turn our body, which gets us moving through the ball, keeping the loft on, and be more aggressive. If we can be more aggressive, it's also more positive, depends which word you want to use, but we can start to get better contact and more spin. And obviously everybody wants more spin. As long as we can control that spin, I'm happy for everyone to have spin. So if we can get this set up correct, we can get Dave a little bit more spin. So like we saw, he's going to be a little bit closer to the ball now, so he's going to get a reference of how close he is.
That's what I'd normally.
So that's where Dave would normally be, pretty much like a full shot. You can see he's now closer, taller. He's going to open that club face slightly, and again if we shuffle back a little bit so we get that ball position a bit further forwards, good. And then from here Dave can now turn on to that weight left and hold his finish. Good, so launched in the right direction, took the slope, but again to 5 feet, so very easy.
It felt that I was hitting it a lot further than I normally would.
Yeah, so Dave's feedback there is it feels like he's making a longer swing to get that. But obviously now he can rotate better to be able to get that club a little bit further back and let the club head do the swing really. The weight of the club head comes through and we're able to get to a finish. So obviously we've talked about setup there, and obviously what we saw on the camera was a little bit of what my video yesterday was on, where the left arm wanted to lose connection, and it would encourage Dave to either drive the club and take loft off, or catch the ground before because he'd release his hands. So with Dave's shirt, what we're going to get him to do, just like I said yesterday on the video, is get him to tuck that sleeve, and then when he's in his finish, he's always got feedback of how his arm's connected. So we'll do that on this shot. Again, a very good shot there, but we're going to hit 3 and obviously see how, if it's more consistent or less than before. Very good. So hit the landing zone again, coming out with a little bit more loft and going straight on target. Cured, some would say. Well, we'll see. So obviously there Dave's able to hit 3 shots, pretty much consistent compared to before. If you think about before we went through his videos, he had 2 around about 15 to 20 feet long, 1 20 foot short, and then he did it 1 to 5 feet, but obviously it took 4 shots. And as we saw, that's probably similar to what happens on the golf course. And that's what we saw on, like, obviously from his stats. He might have 6 chip shots, he might hit 1 really good, but the rest are then costing him. His putting's good, as we saw by the numbers, but if he has a day where his putting might not be on, if he plays somewhere else, obviously the score can quickly rack up. So we're going to refilm Dave now, and obviously I'm going to do a before and after comparison, and then we're going to see, obviously, you watch that and see what you might pick up. There might be some little things that work for you, and obviously it doesn't work for everyone, because you might have some other tendencies, but you can start to see what to expect from a short game lesson. Obviously you want to be getting these things, you want to see your before and afters and see where you've improved, and then obviously after that I would hope that obviously you would get a report through, because it's easy for me to tell Dave, obviously put that down. We've gone through a few different things. Obviously we've narrowed his stance, we've got him closer to the ball, we've got his weight left, and obviously we're thinking about arm connection. That's 4 things. I wouldn't expect myself to go away from a lesson and remember everything every time. So I'd expect obviously him to have some feedback, send him over this information and be able to take that away. He's got his drill here so he can always check his setup, so that's ticked, and then for his motion now we've got his shirt tucked. So let's film him up and then let's talk about his before and afters. Okay, so here we've got Dave's before and afters. So again, it's set up, we can clearly see that his stance is a lot narrower. He's leaning a little bit more left, so the weight's left. Again, shaft is now not pressed as forward. We can also see the ball position is a little bit further forwards, so we're keeping it nice at the front of his stance, not letting it sneak back. So obviously we discussed one of the biggest things I see with amateurs, they lose confidence, ball position starts to creep back, start to even hit more thins and more duff. So keep that ball position back. If we've got a nice narrow stance, we can rotate a lot better, and that's the key in short game, is being able to rotate the body through and let the club do the work. Obviously if we look at the motion as we come back, we know that Dave lost a lot of connection with his left, I keep saying left, with his right arm. You can see on the new one how it stays a lot more connected to his chest. So again, obviously the more those arms are connected, the more we're in control of that golf club. From here, obviously we know Dave worked down. There was a lot of loft off the club coming into impact, and that's why we saw it move off the club very quick and go a little bit long. So coming off very fiery, took quite a lot of grass there, and then we see the left arm loses connection on the way through also. On the new one, obviously coming into impact, we still have loft off, but because Dave's rotating a lot better, there's not much interaction with the ground, the ball pops off nicely, and we see how his left arm stays connected to his chest. So his chest rotates a lot better through, it's not driven through now. We can see how much more athletic that is on the way through. So let's have a quick look at down the line. So down the line straight away we can see big changes. So it can be big changes at setup. We can see his upper body's a little bit more upright in the new one, so he's closer to the ball, much taller. That shaft now is obviously upright, a lot more upright. Should help him get it a little bit steeper, but we shall see in the motion. So we can see that's again a lot more athletic, stood over the ball. as we saw with the motion, it wanted to drop inside and closed. So let's have a quick look on this one. So again, even on the new one, it still wants to drop inside, but nowhere near as much. Again, we can see how that right arm's working a lot better. This is something that we'll monitor throughout the series to make sure Dave doesn't get too far inside and too closed. Coming back down into impact, we saw that the hands got a little bit higher here, so they changed plane. Whereas as we come down here with Dave, we can see how everything stays on that plane. And then on the way through, releases that body and chest, and that club starts straight on target. We can see there, it's hard for Dave to rotate through, it's launched a little bit right, starts to draw around if anything. So we can see the changes there. We're going to monitor that over the series, keep Dave in check, make sure that setup stays consistent, and hopefully that starts to save him some shots. So let's get back to it. So we've just gone through Dave's before and afters there. Obviously you've been able to see the comparison of what we've done in a session. So Dave's not hit a tremendous amount of balls. He's not, you know, stood here and bashed ball after ball after ball. But we've seen improvement straight away. Just basic setup changes and a slight change with his arm is able to get him a lot more consistent. Obviously during a lesson what we would also do is go and hit different shots, again start to play different clubs, but that's what we're going to do in the next short game session. So what we'll be doing is getting Dave playing off different lies, talking him through his process. Obviously he now knows to pick a bigger landing zone, and we're going to start to see how Dave obviously does, how he might struggle out of thick rough. Well, we all do, don't we, really, to be honest, but yeah. He might struggle out of bunkers, so it might be obviously a bunker session coming, it might be tight lies, it might be awkward lies, but we're going to start to do that. But now he's got a basic understanding of what we want from setup, which is pretty much consistent throughout his shots. He can start to play around with different lofts, the different shots, and start to be more aggressive around the greens and give himself a lot more chances for some tap-ins. And then we should start to see that handicap on our course start to reduce, and then from there we should see his handicap hopefully get closer to single figures. Guys, I'd like to, as always, thank Dave for coming on.
No problem at all.
Dave's warm-blooded, he's got his t-shirt on. I'm
West Yorkshire lad.
Right, so thanks to Dave for coming on. It's obviously any questions, guys, any things you want to see, comment below. Obviously any questions you have about Dave's setup and what we've done today, comment below. Obviously I'll answer as many questions as I can. As for now, guys, I will see you again tomorrow. Actually, there will be a video on after James's short game Saturday, so if you're coming over or if you're on this channel, look out for tomorrow where I do another short game lesson with Joe, who won the Vokey wedges from the competition. Have a good night, see you tomorrow.